Tracy, is it still okay to say Happy New Year, or are we past all that?
No, we can because it's been a while since I've been on your podcast last. So we could say Happy New Year. We haven't seen each other in a while.
It's been a little over a year since you were last on here solo, and I'm thankful that you came back. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Although we did have a good episode with Dave Cullum. So no,
Always. Oh, the professor, everybody's favorite professor.
absolutely.
So it's I look at everything now and where we're at. I mean, it's for people that are listening because this will come out today. It's Saturday, and here we are chatting. And I don't know about you, but I anticipated things the carousel was going to pick up once the inauguration happened. But man, this week, just so much things are flying. And I want to grab as much of these conversations as I can. And I think I'm fortunate because I've never stayed in one particular lane. And literally everybody I've had on here, like their expertise in something, so, they specialize in something. And it felt like everything was happening this week.
Well, yeah, we had 80 executive orders right off right off the bat, right? So there's a wide range of topics to that are at the forefront right now.
Well, and as it pertains to you, and I think maybe it's appropriate for people that haven't, for audience that might not be familiar with your work, to just do a quick backstory on you. One of my favorite things about when you and I talk is you came from the cold calling world, and I told you I was
Yes.
a telemarketer and I sold copiers, and that's a master's degree to be able to cold call.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, my background is in commodities, if you're new. I started at the Chicago Board of Trade. Back when I started, there weren't a lot of women in the industry and it wasn't really easy to get in. So, I just was willing to take any possible job that I could get. And so my very first job in the industry was literally selling future options on futures for a boiler room, like the movie. And literally, you're calling 400 people a day saying, "Can you give me money to trade options on futures for you?" Um, and I was the only woman in the firm. And yeah, that's how I got my start. So, you know, but man, that's the most difficult job on the planet, I will tell you.
Do you look at that experience and how much you were able to take away from that and how it carries with you now? Because I don't know that people aren't willing to do that type of cold calling today.
Yeah, I don't think you really have that. I don't think that kind of environment exists. I mean, this was 20 years ago, right? So I don't think that kind of sales environment even exists anymore. But you do learn a lot and you do get like, thick skin and because you deal with all sorts of people. Some people just hang up on you right away. Some people want to talk to you about their life story. So sometimes you'll get a sale. Sometimes, it's just it's a good learning experience, I would say, for probably any industry to kind of be in that cold calling world because it's the grunt job. It's the shit job, to be honest with you. But I managed to work my way up and then I worked on the trade floor and managed a trade desk till the trade floor died. Then I worked at a family office, managing their commodities portfolio, and then I started my own firm in 2022. So
Yeah, and do you find now, from when you started to where we're at today, I almost wonder, like with social media, I mean, it's a blessing. I mean, I wouldn't be talking to you today if it wasn't for it, but was all this carousel going on like at this type of speed, you think back then, and we just didn't know about it, or
no, because I think you were dependent on whatever the mainstream media was and whatever may or may not have come across the wire. But we're kind of in this information age where it's 24/7 and it's global, right? And so I think there's so much more coming at you. And we were kind of talking about this offline before we started this podcast, is that there's just, it's the, 24/7 information age. Nothing is coming from mainstream media anymore. You have access to minute by minute information globally. And so it's a cursing and a blessing at the same time. So if you're, in my particular world, being in the commodities world, I love knowing 24/7 what's happening in Saudi Arabia, for example, or what's happening in, any of the OPEC countries, or what's happening. I need to know if, there was a drone attack, for example, on a Russian oil refinery. What does that mean for global oil flows, et cetera, et cetera. And so that is a blessing, because that kind of information you really couldn't get before this kind of 24/7 age. The curse is that your mind is never turned off, because you just have this coming at you from all angles about everything and every subject. And I think I tweeted out today, or yeah, I think it was last night, I said, whatever happened to those drones? Because I was like, man, that was the thing for a week, and then suddenly it disappeared from the news. And I'm like, but that's what we're fed all the time. And I was kind of trying to emphasize the fact that, like, we have like the attention span of a gnat right now, right? Where you can focus on something for so long, and then the next thing comes up, and the next thing comes up, and the next thing comes up. And so the news cycles tend to be really quick right now, which can be a little bit of an overload sometimes, I think, for your brain.
Well, and also, what I shared with you offline, Dave Collum had pointed out, if you step away from it and come back, you're just so far behind. So for a casual person that thinks, oh, I could watch mainstream media in the evening and maybe the morning news and keep up, I think it's impossible.
Oh, it's absolutely impossible. It's absolutely impossible right now. And you're seeing that in the ratings too, right? So, you just had, say, for example, CNN and NBC, MSNBC just announced that, they're cutting back on their television programming and moving towards more of a digital platform. So, I think that this is just the new age, right? And kind of the old forms of the 6 o'clock news is dying.
Well, and so to speaking of a story that, and we'll get to the Trump executive order here in a little bit, but a story that it feels like years ago and it was only a few months, was Syria.
Well, absolutely. Well, Syria's, the thing with Syria, and we'll go into that, is, they've been in a civil war, or they've been in a war for over a decade, right? And so I think it's come in and out of the news. But, at the time, because I was tweeting about it, I was looking over some of my old tweets, it was a big deal. But that was it, again, a decade ago. And I think, especially when you have a war lasting that long, we see this, for example, in Libya as well, where, it's it kind of dissipates and you become kind of numb to it, unfortunately.
And well, so what were your thoughts then? Having different people on here, I get different perspectives. When Syria, first of all, I never thought they'd get rid of Assad, because that guy's like a cat, man. I mean, like whenever he's on the brink, he always seems to stay in power. And this time, he exited it pretty quickly. But is it about the natural gas pipeline? Is that what the
Okay, I don't think that it is. Now, let's go back to 2009, right? So there was a first proposed pipeline in 2009 called the Qatar Turkey pipeline. That pipeline would have gone through Qatar, through Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, and Turkey, and then out to the EU, obviously, for distribution. And that's been talked about since 2009. Now, 2011 is when the war started in Syria and really hasn't let up. At the time in 2009, that's the Syrian government initially rejected that because they wanted an Iranian-backed pipeline, which obviously neither one of these ever came to fruition. But they've been, talking about that for a very long time, and that would have linked Iran's South Pars gas field to Syria, via Iraq and then connect to Europe. So there's been kind of two different pipelines that have been discussed in that area, in between 2009, 2011, and then the start of the war actually obviously halted any sort of plans for either one of those pipelines.
So okay, so they both had like a blueprint. Was I'm sorry, Qatar and Iran each had an idea.
Yeah,
Okay,
basically.
and then the war started, so that all got scrapped.
Right. And now what's happened during this war is that all of their infrastructure, oil infrastructure and natural gas infrastructure has been decimated. In addition to that, it's all a toxic wasteland because you had um, different factions, different warring factions try to, cipher oil or gas from these abandoned fields, and they're all a wasteland right now. Like they're all a toxic stew. And I wrote about this in 2013 because it literally happened that quickly, and nothing's been done to save this. So uh, if you're looking for any kind of production to come out of Syria at this juncture, things have only gotten worse since 2013 when I started writing about this. And so, you're not going to have, there's no production from Syria. Now, could there be a pipeline from Qatar to, say, Turkey or from Iran? I think the Iranian pipeline, I don't think that's viable at all anymore. Now you could with Qatar. The problem is that there's literally too much geopolitical risk going through that country right now. I don't think anybody. Tell me a company that's going to want to build a pipeline through Syria right now when you don't know who's really running the country right now. There's massive overhaul in any kind of infrastructure. Like if you're trying to link Syria gas into that pipeline to send to Europe, that's not happening for decades and billions of dollars. And so really, I just don't think this is viable. I know that people are sort of talking about this idea again, but I don't think they understand how decimated their oil and gas fields have become.
So with you said Iran is no longer viable.
I don't think that doing Iran I don't think that doing Iran through via Iraq is the South Pars field. It's a shared oil field, and we have always known that Iran sort of smuggled their oil and gas out of Iraq, right? Even during sanctions, right? Because it's a shared oil field, and who knows really what side of the border it's coming from at the end of the day. But I think right now, with the pressure, with the geopolitical pressure, I don't think that anybody's really seriously looking at that route right now. I mean, Iraq's having their own issues uh, in the Kirkuk region. Um, Iran's already having their own infrastructure issues as well. So I just don't think that's I don't think that's a viable at all route at any time in the near future. I think, if, and I use this in quotes, there would ever be sort of a pipeline, I think it would be really through Qatar. And really, Qatar has much more to offer. They've been looking at building out their own infrastructure, right? They have the largest uh, gas infrastructure plan out to 2030 that anybody's ever seen. And so that there's probably more money in something like that. But again, you have a lot of geopolitical risk going through Syria right now, and you're not going to get any oil and gas from Syria to add into the pipeline to get to Europe. And so I just think I think that any talk about it right now is very premature, and I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Because of the instability of Syria right now, because the fighting hasn't stopped.
Right. You have instability. You don't really know who's running the country right now. There's too many challenges going on, I think, within the country and too much money that you've got instability, you got conflict, you got economic sanctions. There's still economic sanctions on Syria. If you want to, are you going to want to build out a pipeline in Syria right now? I'm a company, and let's build out. No, I don't think that would be my ideal choice right now. So I think that's going to be a lot of problems, and not to mention the billions and billions of dollars that it's going to take to sort of rebuild their oil and gas infrastructure, as well as the billions and billions of dollars that it takes to build a pipeline. And so I don't think it's economically viable either. You know, and when you add that to the sort of the geopolitical risk, it's not, I don't see the project happening anytime soon.
Let's say there was no geopolitical risk and they started tomorrow. How long, in your estimation, how long would it take, and how many people would need to be, from a labor standpoint, sent to complete this?
Well, first you'd have to fix their own oil and gas infrastructure. That's going to take you a decade at least. And then you're going to have to build a pipeline. Now, pipelines can be built much faster, right? But, that's still going to take you another, 5 to 7 years, depending on what's happening in the Middle East and the permitting process that goes on there. I know that, looking at our permitting process, didn't take a while. And so I don't think we're going to see anything remotely close to that within the next 15 to 20 years, to be honest with you.
And God only knows what can happen between now and then. I mean, you're just forecasting as we sit here today, but
Right. And you don't know what geopolitical turmoil could happen. I mean, it's very hard. Again, this is why I'm saying if your company, it's very hard to go in there and invest. If it were, you would have seen every oil major immediately after Assad left say, we're in there, right? But nobody's touching it with a 10-foot pole. So
do you anticipate that will get cleared out at some point, or will this just continue, all this
I
conflict?
well, I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of internal challenges and different factions, and there's no real clear leadership, even though we have somebody saying they have clear leadership, but we all know, everybody thought that would happen in Libya, but look at Libya. Libya's still in turmoil. And so, and this is decades later as well. So
Yeah, I mean, you've got the Sunnis, you've got the Kurds, you've got the Turks, you've got the Israelis. There's a lot of factions going on in
a
that
lot of
country
things
right
going
now.
on. Exactly, exactly. So, and there's rumors that Assad might not be done. Who knows? I mean, I just think there's too much in the air right now that I wouldn't count on that, on at least a pipeline going through that country anytime soon.
What is your overall assessment of the Middle East, the region right now?
Well, I think that it's obviously tumultuous as it always is, right? You still have countries that are in turmoil. Well, let's call it the MENA region because I'd like to add like Libya, which is, we'll call it Africa, right? And so let's call it the MENA region, which is Middle East, North Africa. Um, I think that whole region is in a lot of risk. I think that, I think we started seeing some cohesion. We had the Abraham Accords, right? But when Trump was president the first time, and we saw some sort of peace there. Obviously, we all know that that's been in turmoil since we've had this issue with Israel, Lebanon, Syria, and Hamas, Palestine. So, um, so we'll have to see how things pan out. But you know, as usual in the Middle East, there's always hot spots that flare up. This one happens to be a big one. Um, the color wars were a big one. And I think that I think I'll be very interested to see what Trump can bring to the area or the region again. What, and in a lot of respects, things are still okay. Jordan and Saudi Arabia still want to have a relationship with Israel, which is big. That was never before the Abraham Accords. And so I think we need to just sit back and see kind of what happens with this administration and see if we can sort of get back to, something peaceful in the area or somewhat peaceful.
Well, he was talking about, I think it was yesterday. This is what I'm talking about. Like, it's just this information comes at you so fast. I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, but he was talking about asking Saudi, he said, so asking Saudi Arabia for what,
Yeah,
600 billion. But then he goes, well, we'll just make it a trillion, just round it up to a nice even number.
oh no, it's because Saudi Arabia said that they would be willing to invest 600 billion into the United States over the next 4 years. Now, then after that happened, Trump went on, the WEF, right? He just spoke on Friday, and then was banging on Saudi Arabia to produce more oil again. The problem with this is that this time is if they have pledged money to the United States, now they have leverage over the United States and say, well, if you really want us to produce more oil to bring down oil price, then we just want to invest in the United States, like we said. So I think that's just something to keep in the back of your mind.
So he's always a showman, though. He said 600 billion. He goes, well, we're just going to round it up, and just make it an even
Oh,
trillion.
I know. I know. It's Trump is Trump. Everybody acts surprised every time he says stuff, but he is who he is. He doesn't, he hasn't changed. Like everybody knows he kind of embellishes a lot. He likes to talk about himself a lot. And, so you take the good with the bad. Apparently this is what America wanted. This is who we voted in. And, but you know who he is already. Like there's no surprise. Everybody knows who he is. We had him for president for 4 years, so you can't really be surprised that, anything he says. But ultimately, I think that this is a good change, and we'll see what happens over the next 4 years. But it's I think the last 4 years that we had were very taxing. So, I'm glad to see this administration kind of start right off in a good step and have again like 80 um executive orders right off the bat. Like I think you need to charge into this and not look back and not kind of like what my did in Argentina, where he just went for it right? And didn't and you had a few months there that Argentina had some economic issues, but in the end we're a year and a half later, and Argentina is doing tenfold better than they were doing before he came into office, even though it was a kind of a rough start at the beginning.
Would you say the United States from 2016 to now, are they in a stronger position, a weaker position in regards to the Middle East? Because you mentioned Saudi Arabia, they're pledging this 600 billion into the United States, and that comes with what's the word I'm looking for? String.
Right. Yeah, obviously it comes with leverage. You have leverage, right? I think obviously anybody that's been watching the Middle East knows how horrible of a job Blinken has done, how it's weakened our position within the Middle East. It's been a disaster. It's been a disaster. Worst foreign policy president ever. And I said that about Obama, and this is right on par with that. And I'm sorry, and I'm not picking sides. I'm just saying this, I think I think we've had great democratic foreign policy leaders. I just particularly think Obama uh, and Biden have been terrible, and I think we've had uh, terrible foreign policy leaders in the United States. And and I'm so let's just leave it at that.
Well, you look at the way the region was, destabilized during both of their terms, and you can't. I don't know how you can dispute it, and especially in
Right.
relation to what you do.
Well, exactly. And that's, I mean, that particular area, obviously, I have to keep an eye on because that is where, as a whole, where most of the oil and gas comes from, right? That meaning that region in its entirety. So, when we're talking about the MENA region, that is the bulk of what I do is at. So,
So, what would Saudi Arabia? What would their strings be attached to putting this money into the United States?
I think that I think that Saudi Arabia has a lot of huge new plans with this new uh, younger leader, right? And bin Salman, and they have, they want to build the city of Nome. They want to transform Saudi Arabia into a tourist destination, more akin to, say, the UAE. Um, and they have big plans to, expand beyond just oil and gas, obviously, because that's not going to last forever. So they want to expand into minerals and metals extraction, et cetera. And all of this takes a lot of money, particularly kind of the social changes that are happening within Saudi Arabia, the things that they want to accomplish and have it be a main tourist attraction within the Middle East, and kind of transform that landscape and build out Saudi Arabia, which is a noble plan. I think it's a great plan. I think there's a lot of strides in that, but they're going to need a lot of money for that. Right. And so they need higher oil prices. They just do. And so I don't think that, whereas you had in Trump's first administration, them kind of browbeating Saudi Arabia down, like saying, we want lower oil prices, you got to do lower oil prices. And so, we did see a pickup in some of Saudi's exports as well as their production, because they do have some spare they do have spare capacity, whereas the United States doesn't. And I just don't think he's going to be able to use that lever anymore, because now Saudi Arabia is saying, we're going to invest this much money in your country. You can't browbeat us down anymore about oil.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia, they from a sports standpoint, they are trying to expand and expand and expand. Like I'm a fight fan, boxing, and man, they are like trying
Sure,
to
look,
buy it all up.
yeah, they've got boxing, they've got golf, they've got football, they've got, I mean, they're huge. Again, they're trying to be, I think, kind of the next Dubai or the next UAE. But I mean, I like Rida wants to be the next Dubai, where it's a huge tourist attraction. So.
Will they be success? So do they want to make it more Western? Western, like westernize it more?
Well, they have been. And if you've seen what they've done over the last couple decades, they've slowly been making those changes. And I think, since the younger bin Salman has kind of come to power, right? He's young. I mean, his father, who is the head of Saudi Arabia, is like in his 90s. I mean, it's a very old mentality. Now you have this guy who's he kind of first was appointed when he was 35. He's 39 now, but that's relatively young. And so he has all these dreams and ambitions for Saudi Arabia, which I think is great. And so we've seen a lot of social changes within Saudi Arabia, and a lot of loosening of some of those, stricter laws. Women can drive now. You don't have to wear a hijab, depending on what uh, how religious your family is. But, so they are making it more, at least conducive for others to visit that perhaps are not Muslim. right?
Yeah, it's I watched a few boxing fights there. The crowd is so quiet because I don't think you can drink, and it's almost hilarious because like, everybody's sober.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if that changed. I mean, that changed in the UAE, right? And so you can, if you're a tourist, you can buy alcohol there now. Saudi Arabia, you cannot,
And Qatar
but
either.
I happen to know some Westerners that live there that I think if you have some connections, you could get some wine there, I've heard.
Can sip a cocktail or two. Have you ever been over there?
I have not. I have not, but I definitely want to visit.
Would
I
you
think
go there right now with the state of things?
I would Saudi Arabia, sure, I'd have no problem going to Saudi Arabia or UAE or something like that. I wouldn't go to Syria right now. I wouldn't, you know. But sure, I don't, there's, Houthis aren't lobbing bombs at Saudi Arabia anymore. So uh, I think, that relationship at least has cleared up over the last few years a little bit.
What about in terms of Europe right now? Are you following, as how they're doing as a
What a
region?
disaster they are. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Obviously, right? Being big in the energy industry, I'm following the disaster that has become of Europe due to their energy policies, particularly if we look at Germany, for example, right? So, that just continues to make horrible decisions and has seen their industry. I mean, if you look at their industrial production, it's declined. They're in a recession. I don't care what anybody said. They've had negative GDP for the last 2 years, not 2 quarters, 2 years. And you're seeing all their companies leave. For example, BASF, largest chemical company in Germany, right, was built this huge uh, facility in China because their energy prices are too high, and they doubled their facility in the United States in size and shuttered facilities in Germany. So, they have industry that is absolutely fleeing, right? And that includes car companies, that includes chemical companies, that includes everything that Germany is known for because of their disastrous energy policy mistakes that they've been making over the decades. Actually, it started with Merkel, but if we want to bring it closer, because I don't want to dive into 12 or 20 years of German energy policy, but if we look at the Russian invasion of Ukraine, right? They stopped importing cheap Russian gas. Fine, that's great. So what are you going to do? They shut down their nuclear plants. What? I mean, at a time like that, and then had to build out LNG facilities because then they had to import it from other places, particularly, with like the United States and Qatar. And they had to become big importers. They had to build out facilities, which they didn't have before. They got lucky with a couple okay winters this winter. Now, they're kind of screwed again because it's cold. And their storage is depleting. It's pushing up prices once again. They put all their money into wind and solar and haven't realized those are just intermittent. Those are intermittent power sources, which you cannot have as a base load. You need something constant. So that means you need nuclear, you need natural gas. I mean, that's really your only choices right now, or coal. They literally reopened coal plants. The climate Nazis of the world. Sorry, I shouldn't say the climate. Let's cut that part out.
No, it's fine.
The the climate people of the world literally shut down nuclear, the cleanest energy you got. I mean, this is the cleanest energy you could have. It's nuclear power. There is no CO2. They shut that down and reopened coal plants, right? The dirtiest power source that you could have. So anyway, I could go on for ages on how ridiculous their energy policies are and how much it bugs me. But we're seeing a decline overall in Europe. Um, you know, France is doing okay because they've always been nuclear. and have been the nuclear leader. And in fact, Germany, that hates nuclear, imports nuclear power from France, but they don't want their own. So, I think I think I think Brussels is hanging on to a dream that's slowly falling apart, to be honest with you.
So where does that go then? If as it falls
Oh,
apart,
that
what's rock
well,
bottom?
well, we're gonna find out. We're gonna find out because Brussels isn't letting go. If you look at von der Leyen, she's, you know, already pushing for more cohesion of these economies that already hasn't worked. She's like, no, we need to have more cohesion. And people are going to get sick of this. I mean, Italy is not going to, Meloni's not going to be on board with this. She doesn't care. Hungary hates EU, that's clear. Erdogan will be friends with you if he wants to be friends with you. And I think we're starting to see, sort of more of the right Netherlands, right? Their last election that they switched kind of to the right. And so I think I feel like Brussels is sort of losing power. And what do you do when you feel like you're losing power? You try to tighten your grip harder and harder. And I think that's what we're witnessing right now in Europe. And so we'll have to see, how long it takes for kind of people to be done with it.
Yeah, Erdogan is very interesting right now in regards to Turkey because, and I've been having a lot of conversations about that. Is all of a sudden, how serious is he about reestablishing the Ottoman Empire? And yeah, they're making a lot of moves.
Turkey is making a lot of moves and they're smart. That's why, they've always kind of been that balancing act between, kind of like they'll they're always in their own interest. They'll play both sides of the fence, always, if it's in Turkey's best interest. They'll be best friends with the Middle East. They'll be best friends with the EU. They'll be best friends with the United States. They don't really care, right? All they want. And it served them well because what's happening right now? Well, Russian gas is still piped through Turkey and which is still piped through the EU. And they're making a ton of money on that because all the other pipelines were shut down essentially, except for one, pipeline in Ukraine, which most people weren't buying anymore. Only kind of Slovakia and Romania were affected by that.
What about? I mean, does Russia? How do you envision Russia as they sit today in regards to you know being a power? I mean, with Ukraine, because that, I mean, seems to be winding down.
I
Um,
hope it does. I mean, for everybody's sake, I hope it does. It's enough war going on. And what I love about, just on a side note, all these climate, everybody in the West, that these climate nuts, really, let's give money to all of these wars. Whatever. Do you know that the militaries use more fossil fuels than most countries in the world? I mean, really? That's your, you want to clean up the economy. Let's fund all these wars and all this use of fossil fuels. I mean, they don't, the military doesn't run on solar and wind. I'm just telling you that. So to me, it just doesn't, it's counterintuitive and crazy that we're doing this. But that was just I digressed there. Just wanted to point out the
I mean,
um,
it's not the solar that powers the helicopter, so they can fly around.
right.
I thought they only fly on windy days.
Right. Exactly. But I do hope that war boils down. I think enough people have been killed. I hope that some sort of uh, negotiation can come to fruition and that we can, I'd like to see less war in this world, not more. So, I do hope for everybody's sake because, it's very devastating to the country and devastating to people's families and devastating to, where people live. And, we've all seen the horrors of war. And so, again, I hope we can see this wind down. I hope Trump can do something. Um, because so far that, the narrative has been like, let's throw more money at this war. And I just, hope that I hope we can handle this in a different way.
Do you feel like Russia is self-sustaining now because they've been able to adapt on these so-called sanctions that were thrown at them?
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
I mean, they can provide their own oil, natural gas, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, their economy has definitely not been devastated, even though we've had, European and American companies leave. They've been able to deal with that. They've rebranded Starbucks, for example, to their own whatever. They've adapted. People adapt. That's how the world works. And, for anybody to expect anything different is just crazy. I mean, I know that people were expecting that the country to fall, but I was like, people adapt, and we've seen this over and over, not just in Russia, but um, I never thought that, besides the fact that they have a shit ton of natural resources, pardon my French. And so, we need a lot of natural resources. You need natural resources across the world for this energy transition, if we're going to have one, but not even that, just to enhance life, right? To make our lives more uh, easy. Like, I know some people are into that degrowth thing and they want us all to live in caves again, but in reality, nobody's going to do that, right? We all want air conditioning. We all want refrigerators. All want our life to be easier and better and faster. Look at AI. It's a power hungry machine. And so Russia is just blessed. Their land is blessed with natural resources. And so they can always use that as a commodity, um, either for barter or for sale, right? So.
So they're in good standing then, in your view.
I think they're okay. I don't see them collapsing. I'm sorry, nobody wants to hear that, but they've been around for thousands of years. And again, they have a lot of natural resources. And just as China has a lot of natural resource, or actually China's more processors, but they have a lot of natural resources. I mean, these are huge countries. You can't, so I don't think, I think they're going to be fine. I mean, countries that have been around for thousands of years. I mean, they've muddled through, right? I think we as Americans tend to look at shorter term because our country's so young. But, if we look at other countries, they're not as young, even though maybe their territories have grown or expanded, depending on the empire, right?
So as we're moving around the globe here today, Tracy.
I know we are. And I'm
As
saying a lot of controversial things today,
this
but
is
I'm in a mood.
this is great. This is perfect timing. I'm glad we had this conversation today and not yesterday. Maybe you wouldn't have been as controversial.
I probably wouldn't have.
It's because it's Saturday. From now on, we have to record all of our conversations on weekends.
Absolutely.
So as we come into the United States and we look at Trump being in office, he hasn't even been in office in a week, and to
I know. Is that crazy? It's only been 5 days. I feel like it's been an eternity. Like an eternity's happened in 5 days. Don't you feel like it?
it feels like the old world from a week ago. It was years ago.
I know. Is that crazy?
So the executive order, as it pertains to what you do, drill baby drill, and you did a whole deep dive on this on X. But for people that didn't read it, and people need to make sure they follow Shy Girl on here, but that listen, but explain how this is not as simple. And I'm posing this as a question. It's not as simple as what people might perceive.
Correct. It's not. First of all,
All right, let me interrupt you before you go into that. What was the executive order for people that might not
all right.
know?
So the executive order was a national energy emergency, which I actually agree with because of what's coming down the pipeline and kind of the energy consumption that's not only growing because of just regular energy consumption growth within a country, but because of this AI power generation that we're going to need, which literally is 10 times larger than what we're consuming right now for not that people don't have a big enough idea of how much energy consumption that these facilities take and how much more they're expected to expand because it's our new existential war between China. Um, but so the national energy emergency, I don't think anybody read it because all I heard is people say drill baby drill after it came out, and it literally didn't say that at all. So let's start there. All right. So first of all, it encompasses natural gas, oil, but coal also, but also geothermal and um, uh, water and critical minerals. So basically, it was talking about we need to advance these sources of power. It didn't say drill, baby, drill. I'm going to make oil companies, I'm going to beat them over the head until they drill as much as I want, which is impossible. Really, what it said is we need to focus on these areas of energy. We know that he's not a big fan of solar and wind, which is fine. Those two were left out of it. But we had hydro and geothermal, which was interesting, and critical minerals, which we need to build out all of this infrastructure. And just we need for defense purposes. Uh, so it really was an all-encompassing bill that said we need to put this at the forefront of what we're thinking about right now. And, I will, do X, Y, and Z to make sure to facilitate this happens faster than we have seen in the past, meaning permitting, opening up federal lands, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that doesn't say drill, baby, drill. Now, I like literally want to beat this narrative out of people. Everybody stop saying this because it's not what the directive said. In addition, if Trump really thought that we could drill even more, why would he be begging Saudi Arabia to, open up their spare capacity because he knows that they have it? So let's like put everything into perspective. Second of all, we've had two oil crashes, right? Nobody wants to give the oil industry money anymore. Nobody. Like VCs got killed, private equity got killed, banks got killed, right? Because it was the Wild West, it was wildcatters, it was, um, at the time. And the two oil crises that we had, everybody's like, yeah, I'm not really into giving you guys money anymore. And then since 2016, which was kind of that last crash, 2014, 16, when we had that big dive. But basically, we've seen just more and more consolidation in the industry because we're just seeing companies being swallowed up. And what we're seeing now is, I mean, we even had ExoM come out. The CEO of ExoM came out and said, we're not drilling more. We need to keep our investors. And what do investors want to see? They want to see them, they don't want to see CapEx right now. They want to see them paying down debt still. They want to see share buybacks, let's be honest. Because they want to see investor returns. And so these oil companies have been burned. Banks have been burned. Nobody wants to lend to them. Nobody wants to lend to them. And so we haven't seen a lot of CapEx in the last 7 years. And we probably won't see a lot of CapEx anymore because what's happening right now is the oil industry is, we've had all of this consolidation because what we're seeing is the majors or the bigger firms are buying out the little firms because instead of spending CapEx on production, they're just buying production, right? Instead. So they're like, if I buy you out for $1 billion or whatever, X amount of dollars, that saves me $5 billion in trying to, spending CapEx into production. So that's all we've seen. That's why we've seen a massive consolidation in this industry, and we're probably still going to see more consolidation. And I think over the last few years, we have seen US production growth because these smaller companies are producing as much as they can to be attractive to the majors to get bought out for a bunch of money. In addition, and this is a conversation for another day, we can go into um, well technology and what's going on in US wells. I think we've hit, unless we see a lot of new capex in the industry, I think we've hit peak production in the United States. Um, and I'll briefly cover why. One, we're running out of duck wells, which is drilled but uncompleted wells. We're not drilling in the shale industry. You have to keep drilling wells because they don't last as long. Production doesn't last as long from them as, say, a traditional deep well where it can run for decades. But that doesn't happen. You have to keep drilling shale wells because you run out of stuff to frack. It's just the way they are. They're horizontal wells instead of vertical wells. I'm not going to go into that. But so we're running out of duck wells, which is like your inventory. Like, okay, this well's tapped out. Here's my next one, right? You drill it and you just cap it, and then you just keep going to the next one. So we're out of those. Frac crews are way down. Frac crews tell you who is on the field, right? How many crews are out there on the field drilling? Way down, way down. And then we have, we've been fortunate enough that there's been a lot of new technology that has sort of extended these older wells for maybe longer than they should. But what happens is that when you start drilling these wells, the longer you drill them and, the longer you extend them, what comes out of them is less and less of actual crude oil and more of natural gas liquids. Natural gas liquids can really only be made to make petrochemicals. It's not really considered oil, even though the EIA puts those condensates in the weekly numbers. You have to realize that more and more of what's coming out of there is not oil. We can't use it as a traditional, what you would consider what we need to refine oil into, right? And so you're more looking at, you have this lighter and lighter stuff that you can only make petrochemicals, or, super chill it and send it overseas as LNG, which is why we're seeing this massive growth in LNG facilities in the United States and export facilities, because that's mostly what's coming out of our wells, not right now, not actual oil.
So for everyday people that think that the gas prices are just going to come right down because
That never happens. You can't, we're just gonna see declining numbers in the US, and we're just not going to see oil companies willing to go back to the early 2000s mindset where it was drill, baby, drill. They were burning through cash. They didn't care. Everybody was throwing money at the industry because it was new. That's not kind of the case anymore.
how do you where is your how do you feel as this administration has come in now for a week on what the next year will bring in terms of what you're looking at and what you're analyzing?
I don't know. I think they're, I hope they plow through I hope they plow through this. I hope we keep getting changes and changes and changes and make things better. And, we may see, you know, a quarter, two, three that are really uncomfortable, but then it's going to get better. Sort of, if you look at Argentina and what happened there, obviously our two countries, you can't compare the two countries, but you can kind of look at kind of the same mentality that was, sent in there. So, we may have a rough go over some quarters, but in other words, we may see a rise in inflation again. We might see, maybe the stock market falls a little bit, maybe, because of all the things that are happening. But I think in the end, it's going to be much better, because if we can bring industry back to the United States and we can streamline permitting, particularly in the natural resource area and mining and et cetera, particularly in mining, I think that's going to be more beneficial to our country in general. But sometimes big changes like that, if they continue, aren't comfortable at the beginning, but the payoff is good, but in the end, it's, I think, I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen, and we'll see if this pace of change keeps up and how kind of everybody adapts to it.
What? How does bricks play a part in any of this in terms? No.
No, no, no. I mean, I love that everybody brings up BRICS. Oh my God, this is huge alliance. But, first of all, you still have Saudis, selling dollar denominated bonds. They're not selling yuan bonds. They're not selling ruble bonds. Nobody cares. There's not going to, BRICS is a very good alliance. I think that's great for them, but all in all, that's not going to remove the dollar dominance, in my opinion, anytime soon. Perhaps down the road, probably not in your lifetime or my lifetime.
What are you working on now? Got any coffee and mic exclusives for me? Anything?
So what am I working
Yeah.
on right do you want me to give you what areas I think investing wise I'm looking
Yeah,
at? Or
yeah, in that and just some of the stuff that I mean for 2025 that you're going to be professionally working on.
2025, 2025, I think is going to be a good year for midstream, and nuclear and anything power grid related. And then, personally, I have a project coming up, but it hasn't been announced yet. It'll be announced next month. So I'm looking forward to that. There's your teaser. There's your teaser, and that's it, right? So, I think energy is going to be, it's kind of been people haven't really been paying attention to it, over the last year or so after, we had oil go negative and then obviously up to 100 whatever dollars, $130, I think, after the Ukraine invasion. But energy's kind of gone by the wayside. Like kind of things have kind of been sideways all of 2024. But I think that, it's going to come to the forefront again. And so, again, like I said, we're going to need a lot of grid build out. So look at companies that supply grid parts and midstream US in natural gas is going to be amazing. I think that we're going to see a lot of build out in pipelines because right now for AI data centers, you're going to need natural gas. Why? Because we have a shit ton of it and it's readily available. I think nuclear is going to be great, but we only have so many we only have so many 3 Mile islands that you can reopen, right? In order to build an entire new facility, even with SMR technology, that's still going to take, we're still going to have time with permitting and building out those structures. And I think those are later on the best way to go, starting now looking at it. But you're going to need a lot of natural gas right now. So I really like midstream, which includes transportation, storage, and of natural gas. I think that's going to be very important. We've had a lot of companies. Larry Fink just said, Larry Fink's looking at buying a natural gas facility in Virginia, and natural gas pipeline companies are in talks with AI companies about literally directly tapping into the pipeline so they don't have to go through the utility company. And so I think that's kind of going to be a really good area to watch.
How I know I'm running out of time here with you, but how concerned are you in regards to the strength of the grids in this country?
Oh, well, yeah, that's why I said you need to start looking at uh, grid suppliers. I just talked about this in New Orleans conference. So definitely look into grid infrastructure suppliers because we have an aging grid. We have the one of the oldest grids aside from Europe and the planet. We need help, and all we've done is like build on top of old technology, which is not really, it's kind of like using duct tape, right? To build stuff out and just keep it. We're just gonna keep it on and put some more duct tape. And so we're gonna need a whole overhaul of grid infrastructure, and that's something that's not really being talked about.
Yeah, that's like my biggest concern, in Arizona is, God forbid, energy or the grid went down here in the summer,
Right?
dead,
What would,
gone.
right? It's 130 degrees out. You'd be like,
And
so yeah, we definitely need an overhaul. I mean, that's just nationally, not, everywhere.
God,
So
what would a project like that undertake? Like how long would it?
billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars. So start looking at those companies, guys. I'm not kidding.
How long would it take to even complete something like that?
Well, I think you would do it piece. You'd have to do it piece by piece. You'd have what they'll probably do is look at, the areas where you see have the most data centers and need the quickest overhaul, and they'll probably start there, and then you'll go out to more remote areas. But you can't do it all at once anyway. You have to do it kind of in a section because it'll a lot of except for there's only the grids are kind of like in patches, right? It's not like every state has their own grid. Um, so you'd have to do it kind of like grid by grid, state by state. It's gonna take a while, but it's like a rollout. You know what I mean?
Where are the data centers mostly most of them in Texas, California?
No, Virginia, believe it or not, you've got Virginia,
Mm.
Tennessee, Texas. Now they're starting to look at the upper northeast, but really they've been kind of in that middle to southern East Coast because their energy prices are so cheap there. That's why.
That makes sense. God, what an amazing time to be alive right now and covering all this.
I know it's crazy, right?
Like, did there like? I say that to myself. I've been saying it a lot lately.
It's so crazy. This is why I'm not sleeping.
Yeah, me neither. Where can people find you?
So I'm my only social media account is Shy Girl. Actually I do have an IG account, but it's like fun fun pictures. So my only professional social media account is at Shy Girl. My company's X is at Hill Tower RA. Yeah, and that's it right now. So and then hilltowerresourceadvisors.com is my company.
So if anybody wants to find you professionally on there, they can go to the website. And
Check it out. Yep.
Tracy, as always, I love our conversations. Thanks for coming back, and I look forward to an exciting year for you in 25 and more conversations ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mic drop.